Okay, it's 2:00. Yay! I don't know how many of you live in time zones where you have to set your clock forward or back a couple times a year, but for me, it's annoying. I'd rather have the same time year round. So hello, everybody. In Bakersfield, it's absolutely gorgeous today. I think it's a little bit chilly, but it's blue skies. And let's see the temperature. Right now, it's 59 degrees, beautiful, big, white, puffy clouds and blue skies. So we have a lot to talk about today, don't we? I have lots of questions, and I've got some examples here and things to show you to help clear up some of the confusion. We are here talking about the ITAG-Yoke knit-along that we're doing. We just got into the guts of it on Friday, and that is the yoke. There's a lot to a yoke. It seems like it's a really simple concept, really, but it can get very deep quickly. So for those who've never knit a sweater before or haven't had a lot of experience knitting sweaters, just keep it on the simple side. Just follow in Ann Budd's book and choose some simple stitch patterns. I gave you several in the handout, and all of those would work very well for doing a simple design. I chose those specifically for people who have not done a lot of sweater knitting, because I know the people who've done a lot of sweater knitting will be able to find their own designs. So that's why I did that. So let's see who's on here, okay? This is the fun part. So let's see, we've got Judy Hertel from St. Joe, Missouri, Elaine Homestead from Georgia, Adriana, Luana Hendricks, also from Missouri, Carol Corcoran, Michelle Forbes from the UK, Jay Hansen, Kelly Mycat from New Hampshire, Judy Joyce from Bakersfield. Hello, Judy. And I didn't go to our guild meeting yesterday because I have a sore throat. But other than that, I feel pretty good, and I just didn't want to spread it around to everybody else. So I stayed home. But you can't get it from me on this video, so you're safe, okay? Nancy's Needlework from Virginia. Hello. Sue Fuji from Nevada, Carson City, Nevada. Bonnie Davis, Mary Inman from Sea Island, Georgia. Francois from Lyon, France. Hello. Francoise, I got to say it correctly. Pamela Matthews from Redmond, Washington. JB23274 from the UK. That's a good name. Katharina from Berlin. Hat Lover 67 from upstate New York. Scott Tigner, Cold Meadow, Janice Mason, Amy Schmitz, T. Haberkin, Nina Kellen, Cheryl Peterson, Lizanne, Susan Day, Sandra Morin, Grammy Lully, Susan McBride, and a bunch of other people. Thank you, thank you, thank you for joining in. It's going to be a lot of fun. So don't forget to give me thumbs up and invite your friends. You know, down, let's see, at the bottom of your screen, or maybe over at the side, there's an arrow that goes like this. That means share. You can click on that. You could actually click on it right now, and it'll give you a link for sharing, and you can either share it in any of your social media groups, Facebook, you can put it on Reddit, you can put it on Ravelry, any other Twitter, whatever you want to share it. But if you share it now, people might have a chance of catching it, part of it in the live version, but they can always come back and see it later. So I have a lot of questions from you all. I also made this up. Now, one of the questions Susan Marie asked was the difference about the front neck, you know, and whether you want to do short rows in the back, where you want to put the short rows, and how many short rows should you put. So I made this little drawing. This is a person. These are side views, stick figure side views, okay? This is a person who has a very straight neck. Their neck's like this. Okay, and they have very little curvature in the back of their neck. And the rounded, that's the top of their shoulder. So a neck, a crew neck, would fit a person who has a very straight neck. It would just sit right at the tops of the shoulders, and it would have equal leeway in the front and the back. It would be centered on the tops of the shoulders, and it would not choke them. They would not feel like they're being choked, and therefore they don't need any short rows. The person who has the normal curvature of the neck is coming forward a little bit, and then the sweater sits here. Then the crew neck comes up right here and actually feels like it's pressing against your throat. It makes you feel like you're choking a little bit. For those people, they need short rows in the back. What the short rows do is they raise up the back, which lowers the front. Okay? Then the third picture is a person who has more of a kyphosis, a more severe curve on their back, and this person needs short rows, but where they need the short rows are down here at the bottom. Now, the question was asked, how can you tell where to put your short rows and really how many short rows you need? Let me show you. When we did our measurements, I'm getting another colored pin here. There's two things to take into account here, and that is one is bust shaping, which we haven't talked about yet, and we're not going to talk about it yet. We're not time to, but for a person like this, where they have a lot of back curvature, you would actually measure from the top center of the neck, this top of the shoulder, and measure down to where the bottom of their sweater is going to come. And then you would also measure from the same point on the shoulder to the front where their sweater is going to come. And you would compare these two lengths. And you can see right now, this line is longer. And that tells you how much you would need to add in short rows right here. Now, for a person with a normal curvature, they may have a bust, so we'll have to take that into account. And that can change your sweater length also. And we'll talk about that when we do bust shaping. And that person might want to do some short rows on the front of their sweater to account for their bust. This person doesn't need to do any short rows. There's not going to be any change between the back and the front of their sweater unless they have a large bust. This person, you can see a little bit that there's going to be a longer here, even if they don't have a bust. Without the bust, I'm not very good at drawing straight lines backwards. But you can still see that the back neck is slightly higher than the front neck. This is where you're going to put your short rows here. Now, I have a couple examples of short rows. This one is my Zweig, and this is the front of the sweater right here. This is the front. And take note of how long it is from here to here. Let me get a ruler. It is 1 1/4 inches. That's the front. And here's the back. You can see it's a lot longer. Do you see that? So there were short rows added between the neck and the top of the design. And that looks okay. It looks okay. Even if this design came right up to the neck, the short rows back here would not look bad because they're going to be hopefully in the same color as the neck. So it just makes the neck look like it's the top of the sweater. The edging makes it look like it's a little wider. But that's where you would put those type of short rows in if you need them right here. If you need them down here at the bottom of your yoke, you would add them, this is the back of the sweater, you would add them right here in this area, all across here. Either way, they're pretty invisible. You're not going to add them in this portion here. There's not going to be any short rows in here. It would mess up your design. You can't do that. This is another yoke sweater that does not have any, it just has the ribbing design in the neck. And the only way I can tell is by looking at it. Okay, here's the front. And you can see this was the ribbing for the neck. From here to here is the ribbing, and that's the same all the way around. But in the first section after that, in this section, it's this long. See that? On the back, it's this long, almost twice as long, because this is where the short rows are to bring the back neck up. And you can see it brings the back neck up. It would see, and which brings the front neck down. If you push the back neck up, the front neck goes down. So I hope that clears up. You can also, again, if you needed to, you could have put the short rows in across here. Okay. Let me go down quickly and see if there's any questions already, and then we'll go to the written ones. Okay, remember to put your question, put the word in all caps, question. Okay, let's see. No questions yet. Good. Okay, so we'll start on the written questions. The first one is from EH2O. And she says, or he says, can you please discuss using variegated or marled yarn for body of sweater and solid colors for color work, stranding, or mosaic? What do you think? I think it would be stunning. It would be very lovely. And it's a great way to mix and match yarns from your stash. If you don't have enough of that colored yarn for the background, then you could use it for the color work in the yoke and do the background in a solid color. Either way, it would be absolutely beautiful. That's a good suggestion. Same person says, can you please discuss pros and cons of steeking? Yes. So steeking, you know, when you create the steek, which is the stitches, cutting is not steeking. Cutting is cutting the steek. The steek are the stitches. They're called bridge stitches. They bridge between one part of the fabric and the other part of the fabric. When you create those, if you're using color work, you do knit one color, knit one the other color, and you rotate them back and forth. If you're using just a solid color, one color, you just knit the stitches, and you don't need to do anything special to them. The drawbacks are if you're working with really heavy yarn, because it's going to fold back. The steek is going to fold back, and then it's going to make a double thickness there. That is a drawback. That's something to think about. If you're using really heavy yarn, I would also reinforce it with the sewing machine. There's no problem reinforcing with the sewing machine. It's super easy to do. It does not ruin your sweater. A lot of people think on a sweater they have to do everything by hand. If a sewing machine will do it better, I use a sewing machine. I do most of my steeks by hand, but if, like last time I showed you those sweaters, remember I showed you the 2 sweaters from my husband where I sewed the steeks on the sewing machine, and they were just plain knit stitches. There was nothing special about those steeks. I think that's in Suzanne Off the Cuff number 2. You can go back and look at that and see those sweaters if you want and how I sewed them. I didn't get them out again. But I wouldn't steek just to be steeking. Like if you're doing something in cables or lace or non-color work, there's no need to steek. You can just knit it flat back and forth. And if your yoke, if you want to have a tab in it, you can knit the yoke back and forth. And then below the yoke, you can bring the fabric together, add some stitches there, and continue knitting in the round. In any case, you always need to swatch and check between your gauge for knitting flat versus knitting in the round. For many people, there is a difference. In fact, for most people, there's a difference. If you don't have a difference between your gauge of knitting flat versus in the round, you're an exceptionally good knitter. Okay, so next questions. This is from Vicky Presho. Hi, Suzanne. I absolutely love all you do to help us become expert knitters. Thank you. I'm wondering about tension. How do we determine whether we have good tension or have tension issues? What does good tension look like? What does the term tension include? Is it only row and stitch issues, or does it include edge stitches, cast-ons, and bind-offs? Thank you very much. To me, tension means the evenness of the stitches. So what is the difference between tension and gauge? Gauge is how many stitches or rows you're getting in a certain amount of area. Tension is how even are your stitches from stitch to stitch and from row to row, and includes all of the fabric, including the edge stitches, cast on, and bind off. And that's something that I teach in my boot camp classes, is getting even tension. If you've heard of the word of rowing out or gutters, Those are things that you can see on the back side of the fabric that shows that you have uneven tension. And I don't have a swatch to show as an example. Let me see. Let me dig in my bag here. I'm trying to get all of my samples like that. Here's a big swatch. This is the right side, and this has even tension. This is done with 3 different needle sizes. On the wrong side, this is where you'll notice the problems with even tension. If you see gaps, and they're called gutters, like a line every so often regularly across the back of your work, those are called gutters, and that means that you have a difference in size between your knits and your purls. And it's not always the purls that are larger or always the knits that are larger. You have to experiment and see which it is. For me, the problem, I used to have that problem. For me, the problem was that my knits were too big, and I'm a continental knitter. And I did tons and tons of research on it, and everywhere people talked about the purls are too big. Well, I kept trying to tighten up my purls, and guess what? The problem got worse and worse and worse because my problem was knits. And unless you experiment, you can't really tell. I have some excellent blog posts, which if Diana is making the notes for this, I'll link down in the bottom of this video on even tension. I have a whole series in my blog. Did you know I have a blog? I have a blog, but I don't use it very often. I use the blog when showing pictures in sequences and telling a story between really is an educational tool. So I have a whole series on there about reading your knitting and tension. There's a whole thing on it. I do have a few videos on tension, even tension at the edges, and just working even tension in general. On my blog, I have a thing that shows how to figure out whether your knits or your purls are the problem. So that's a good one. Great question. Thank you for asking that. This is from iMargaret73. She says, I found the cords in my high sharp set difficult to use. They seem to be stuck in the shape from being stored, which is coiled. And can I recondition them? I know you covered this somewhere, but I can't find it. I'm thinking of just ordering a much longer cord for this knit along project anyway, as the longest in my set is only 24 inches. I've had problems with cords from any needles getting stiff, and I steam mine. Some people say they put them in hot water. Just Google it and see. So there's lots of different techniques. Maybe some people will chime in my Ravelry group and talk about that. I just use my fabric steamer, garment steamer, and I pin them out to be straight. I pin them onto my blocking board and I just steam them until they go straight. And that seems to fix the problem for me. So you can see what works for you. This is isomer. That's a good one. I like isomer. Are you a chemist? Isomer, like the opposite? As a spinner, I often need to buy roving to make a sweater. Could you not use the weight of the yarn to figure the yarn needed as I would to decide to buy roving to buy? Yes. So if you need 100 grams of yarn, if you need 700 grams, 800 grams, you buy 800 grams of roving because it's going to weigh the same in the end. Yes, that's an excellent question. And you just buy the same amount, and then you're going to spin your yarn. Good question. Okay, next page. This is from Susan Marie, and I may have answered this. I talked about the neck curvatures already. That was for Susan Marie. And I also talked about where to put the short rows. Now, some people also ask, do they need to put the short rows in after the cast on, or can they wait till after they come back and pick up the provisional stitches and work up? Either way is fine. You can do it either way. So if you don't know whether you want short rows, don't put any in, knit your sweater, and when you come back to the neck and take those stitches off the provisional yarn and you decide that, yes, you would like to have short rows, you can add some at that time. It's okay to do that. Okay. Here's another question from Susan Marie. She says, are there any rules of thumb for how much yarn the yoke takes versus the whole sweater? She's talking about using multiple colors in the yoke, like 2 colors or more. Each stitch pattern takes its own amount of yarn. You would have to knit a swatch without, it's really tough. You could knit a swatch, measure it, figure out the weight per square inch, then unravel it and see how much of the weight was each yarn. Then you would have a percentage of the yarn that you would need. That's the best way, most time consuming. The other way is to guesstimate. For example, you could knit a plain swatch in one color and then knit the same swatch using your 2 colors and see how much difference there is. That does not mean the difference is the second color, because you probably used less of the first color also, but it gives you an idea of how much more yarn you would need for the yoke. It's kind of a tough question, and it's trial and error, and each design will require its own amount of yarn. I just buy a whole skein of the second color for the yoke. You know, I mean, you can't buy half a skein, and a whole skein is going to be plenty for a second color. So that's how I deal with it. I'm trying to figure it out. Suzanne, I'd like more than just moving my round neck more forward. I would like a scoop neckline. So there's several ways that you can do a scoop neckline. One is you can start out with a larger neck to begin with, because it's going to have to come down in the front, and then do more short rows. Yes. The other way is to not cast on for the whole neck, like cast on from maybe here to over here, and then add stitches for a few rows, and then cast on a whole group of stitches to join the 2 sides. Those are the 2 ways to do it. If you want to stay with the yoke, though, what I would do is just start with a larger circle to begin with, and then have more short rows, so it lowers the circle in the front, and that gives you more of a scoop neck. Okay, but stays within the yoke style and yoke patterning. Okay, this is from BC in Juneau, Alaska. I'm trying to learn 2-color brioche in the round. Now, she has a concern about when you do 2-color brioche in the round, when you get to the end of the round, it's very tricky about not having a funny little jog there. And I have a video on that. She said she watched the video, but she's still having problems. That's something that maybe we need to talk about. Maybe she could send me a picture on Ravelry. If you could send me a picture of what your work looks like right there, so I can actually see what you're doing, or better yet, make a little video of how you make that color change and send it to me, and I'll look at it, and then I can help you. This is from Nina K. She says, Suzanne, please explain where we're to post our pictures of weekly progress. Thanks. Maybe Delise can make a new thread for project post. Tongue twist of the project in process pictures. That would be great. I would love to see what you're doing anyway. That'd be really, really fun. Okay, this is from Z Purls. Is there any disadvantage to adding my neck shaping short rows at the end when I'm attaching the neckband? I just talked about that. Hi, Suzanne. This is from Zucane. I considered doing the sweater in 100% alpaca yarn. You mentioned that it will give over time. Is there any way to determine how and how much the sweater will give in the end in order to calculate it correctly? I would knit a pretty good size swatch, pin it to a coat hanger, put some weights on it, like maybe some paper clips or something that, not a lot of weight, maybe like 1/4 of a skein of yarn, 25 grams of yarn on it, and let it just hang there for a week or so. Then take that off, let it rest for another week or so, and then measure your stitch and row gauge on it. See how that works. Also be aware, alpaca is very, very warm. Okay. Let me see what's going on up here. Let me catch up. And then we'll come back to the paper questions. Okay. I know I saw one on here. Ergen Artesia, is there a particular steamer that you would recommend? You know, they're all pretty crummy. They all leak and they all spit. I use the Rowenta handheld steamer. Works good for me. You can't hold it perfectly flat. You can kind of hold it at this angle. So sometimes I'll hold my blocking board up a little bit if I'm going to block. I use the steamer on my blocking board. Oh, this is excellent. Urgent Artesia on the 2 color work swatch. Try to figure out how much weight you need. She says pre-weigh the 2 yarns before knitting the swatch and then weigh the balls once the swatch is done, and the difference is how much was in the swatch. Great idea. Very, very smart. Way better than what I was suggesting. Leslie Dunn. If we add short rows after the fact into the provisional cast on, you would need the first short row to be the longest and the last to be the shortest. Yes, that is correct. You would just do them in the reverse order. This is from Michelle Forbes. Hi, Suzanne. Question. I'm making a size 44 chest. This includes ease, but my upper arm measurement of 14.5 inches, including ease, does not match chest size in Anne's book. Help. In the knit along, in the directions for the yoke, I have you use the measurements from your arms plus your ease and the measurements from your chest plus your ease. So it doesn't matter what size your arms or your chest are. And once we get past, so that accounts for everything, no matter what size you are for the yoke. Once we get to the point where we're going to divide the yoke off to the arms, then that's when you're going to be concerned about how much goes into the arm and how much goes into the body. So at this point, if you're following along in the knit along handout, I explain how to do that. But if you're following in Anne's Bud's book, she does not. So maybe that's a good one for another video. Let me write that down. I can do that. Chest arm discrepancy. Okay, it's in my book. I'll make that. That's an easy one to make. Okay, that's all the questions up there. Let's go back here. This one is from Cold Meadow. She says, I'm planning on doing color work only in a small section of the yoke. I also want to work with a steek. How can I mark the steek stitches in the rest of the body where I have only one color of the stockinette stitch? One color and stockinette stitch. Can I put, for example, a purl stitch where I want to cut the steek? Certainly, that's a great idea. But you could just maybe run a strand of a thread down those stitches, like forward, back, as you work those. So it'll put a little thread there to mark it. I think when we reinforce the steek, if you want to use the crochet method, that it would be better without the purl stitch. It depends on the gauge of your yarn too. If you're using worsted or heavier weight yarn, you would be machine reinforcing. If you're using fingering weight yarn, you could probably do the crochet reinforcing. So it's kind of 6 of one, half a dozen the other. Just think about that. Think about how you want to mark that center stitch. This is from Cat5TX. She says, Suzanne, can you explain how to calculate the length from the yoke to the wrist on the schematic? The yoke depth is 9 inches, or I mean, it's the same as, for me it's 9 inches. It's the same as your armhole depth. Okay. It's really a hard one to get because it's much easier to measure it after you've knit it. Depending on the length of your yoke, you would put it on, and then you can measure from here to however long you want your sleeve to be. It's kind of a subjective measurement. And you can't really measure that on your body in advance. There's no way to do that because there's no way for you to know exactly where that yoke's going to hit. You can guess. I don't know. Does anybody have a suggestion for that? Let's see if something pops up here, okay? Okay, Vicki Luxton says she has the arm-chest circumference discrepancy. Many people have that. I would say many people have that. Jane Hart, Suzanne, I was able to figure out my cast-on stitches, which came within 1 stitch from Ann Bud's chart. The only thing is it put me into 5 stitches per inch. My original gauge was 5.6. Is this correct? Jane, I would have to have more information. I would have to have what size you were originally intending to work, what stitch gauge you were looking under, and then to know that you're getting 5.6. So what size? You gave me 5 stitches to the inch. And what size? What size do you intend to knit? And then we'll figure out what size you fall into, okay? Adriana, question, can you go over fitting different horizontal designs into the yoke? Yes, I can. That's an easy one. So we have our, let me get my other little board out here. It's way easier than what you imagine. Okay, I'm going to do a little bit of drawing here first. I do not claim to be an artist. I'm a knitter, but I'll show you what I got. Okay, here's the neck opening. And right after you have your cast on, the very first thing you do is increase, right? And then you knit for a distance. And then you have another increase round. And then you knit for a distance and you have your last increase round. Or Ann Bud has you do 4 increase rounds. I like 3, but you can do 4. It's okay. And then out here, that's actually the bottom of the yoke. That's not an increase round. In fact, let me change that. Let's switch that. So it's not confusing. Okay, so got it? So after this increase round, but before this increase round, the stitch number stays stable. So you can put a little design element in there for however many rows you want to put it. You can fill up the whole space with the design, or you can just have it within the space. Then you have another increase round, and between that increase round and the next one, the number of stitches stays stable again. You can add another design element in there. You can use up the whole space or not. And on the increase rounds, you can even make them decorative. You could make them in garter stitch. You could make a garter round or 2 garter rounds that include all of the increases, so it kind of hides them. Out here, you have a wide space between the bottom of the yoke and the last increase round, and that's where you can put in your biggest designs. That's why I gave you different types of... Ergen says, I have massive markers. My husband bought these for me, so you know how men are. They like things big. So now, this is the circular design that I talked about in the handout, okay? So you can plug, you just have to figure out your stitch and row gauge of your design element. So let's say you have, this is going to be 4.5 inches from here to here. And let's say you're getting 7 rows to the inch, 4 is 28, that's like 32, 33 rows in that thing. So you could have a design that is 32 rows tall at the most. And then you have to figure out how many stitches you have around, and you want your design to fit in here, right? So this is where you can fudge. You can increase or decrease several stitches, and it makes no difference whatsoever. So let's say you need a multiple of 18, and your 18 goes in here, and you need 4 extra stitches to make a complete multiple of 18. Just add 4 stitches in there. It's okay. It's okay. 4 stitches isn't going to make a big difference. And then you can take them out at the end if you want to, if it really bothers you. Same thing with every single round. Knitting is very flexible, so you can add or subtract stitches to make your stitch count fit, to make your stitch design fit in there evenly. Now, I'm really having a hard time talking today. I think it's because I'm not up to par. So let's talk about the other design, okay? This one is the wedge style. So you would have you could put in a design that is more wedge shaped. And your increases would fall along the lines of the wedges. Now you could have, I just randomly chose that, okay, for the wedges. And you've seen lots of sweaters that look like that, haven't you? Haven't you seen a lot of designs where they're wide and then they get skinny? And this is really cool to do with cables. You can totally play around with it. You just start with a small cable and you make increases on either side, kind of under the edge of the cable, and you bring out new legs of the cable and you can widen it and snake it around. It's really cool. It's really fun to experiment and play with that for people who are more experienced knitters. For beginning knitters, it's mind-boggling. And I'm not expecting you to do that. So in this instance, you could put some sort of geometric design with knits and purls. Like you could use a lot of those Gansey designs. So you could have, garter ridges, or let's say you have a pyramid, like I put the pyramid stitches in there. Something like that. Let's see, reflective, I'm getting reflection from my window. Can you see? And then you just improvise, if you want to make a design that repeats around the yoke. Let me see if I have questions from that. Those are the 2 ways to do it. And either one's really fun. Let's see what people said. Okay. Okay. Okay, now I'm catching up. Somebody asked about turning a flat design into a, I think somebody deleted, so I don't know what's talking about. Leslie Dunn. This isn't knit along specific, but is it possible to use Ann Budd's charts to grade a design for different sizes? I've always been intimidated about grading patterns for others. You can, and that's where most people begin. Eventually, you'll figure out her system. It's mathematical, and that's why you can use it to jump from a size and a stitch gauge to another box that's similar, and it'll fall in place. Like when I talk about doing sizes that aren't on the chart, you just figure out what your chest circumference is in stitches and find one that has that number and then follow the directions, because she uses an Excel spreadsheet. It's all mathematical, and it's once you figure it out, you can create your own spreadsheet. But yes, you can use her book, and it's okay with her to do that. Question, how do we avoid the yoke sweater's mummy effect, for lack of a better word, especially around the upper arm torso, or where quite often the construction restricts movement? Okay, you want all of your increases to be before the tips of your shoulders. Then you won't have that problem. It's when people start spreading the increases way down into the yoke, then you get this constricted. The way the yoke is, let me use my markers again. And this goes back to Elizabeth Zimmerman's pie shawl, okay? When you are creating the increases for your yoke, they need to fall between the neck and halfway to the depth of the yoke. All of the stitches that are increased on this line are the same number of stitches that are out here. So you know when you're doing a pie shawl and you start out with a circle and then you double it, right? And then the calculations are based upon increasing by 4 stitches per round. So if you make your increases every round, you would increase 4 stitches every round. If you make your increases every other round, you'd make 8 increases every other round. If you make them every 4th round, you would make 32 stitches. So 16 every 4th round. 16 every 4th round, and you would just systematically get bigger, and so it would be flat, it would be a circle, and it would be a flat. It would not become concave or convex. So Elizabeth Zimmerman figured out that every time the distance from the center, the diameter or the radius, either time the radius or the diameter doubles, the stitch count needs to double, and it falls in with the 4 stitches per round increase. It matches perfectly. The same thing. So, and the last increase rounds, they're very wide. So the depth of the round is so you start out really little. So hard to explain. Okay. Do you see the distance between these? This is a pie shawl. So the next round would be way out here. It'd be so big that it wouldn't even fit on this board. And the one after that would be huge. This part in here is what we're using for the yoke. We're just removing the center for the head. So the stitches between, let's say that this is 360 stitches on this round. From here to here is 360 stitches. And at this point, the 360 stitches still lay flat. But if you go past that without increasing, they're going to start curving up. So that's at the point where you have to make another increase round. What happens is many times when people are designing a yoke, they make the increases distributed between the bottom of the yoke and the neck. And that's where you get this constricted area in here. All of the increases need to be made between the neck and the top of the shoulders. Because from there, it's got to have a lot of room to go out from the shoulders. This is the last increase round. So everything fits out to here. And then you're like adding a lot of stitches so that it can fit over your arms. Does that make sense? So you can go like this. In fact, you should be able to go all the way out like this to here, and the yoke will come all the way around like this because it's actually a circle and it's folded in half here. So the yoke would, if you put your arm straight out like this, the yoke should go like this. And over to here, you should be able to do that. Now, if you go like this, it's probably going to lift the front of your sweater up. Okay, does that answer that question? Carol Corcoran, question. I'm using Lopi yarn worsted. Was thinking of doing knitted steek, purl, then 7 rows knit, then 1 purl. When finished, you turn, pick up knit stitches form from the purls. I'm using Lopi yarn worsted. Was thinking of doing knitted steek, purl, then 7 rows knit, then 1 purl. Oh yeah, that would be fine, except I don't pick up from the edges of stitches when I'm picking up. I pick up between the stitches. And I know I've seen some people pick up in the leg of the stitch when they're finishing their steek, but I actually go between the stitches. So the purl, you would be going on the outside edge of the purl, and it would give you a purl on the edge of your fabric. So let's see. Does that answer that? Oh, now I understand why yoke increases up. Oh, go in waves. Yes. Kathy Roosh, question. Still not understanding increases with lace on yoke. Can you show us on that Zweig how that worked? I'm just not grasping it. On the Zweig, she did the increases. She has, it's really hard to see, but here's her design elements. And you can see that up here, she's got these 2 little legs here, and by the time it comes down to here, it's this wide. It goes from here to here. See how it's widening? She adds them in the design. She adds yarn overs that aren't compensated with decreases. She has more yarn overs than decreases. And so, this is something an individual designer would do. Also, she's got her increases here at the top, increases here. Let me look at it. Let me pull it up. Hold on. I don't want to be talking off the top of my head there. Let me look at my pattern and see what it shows for the chart for that, okay? Let me look in my library. I'm going online now, so I can't see you. Well, I can't see you anyway, but let's see, Zweig. You can see me. Okay. Let me look at the chart. Nope, there's no increases in the chart. Yes, there are. There's increases. She goes from row 1 through 12, through 1 through 5, and then she adds 2 stitches. 1 through 5, she adds 1 stitch. Then and this is a design that starts out as 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 stitches wide. After 5 rounds, she adds a stitch. And then again, after 12 rounds, she adds a stitch. So let me go back to my sweater and show you what that looks like. So on here, she's got an increase round up here, another increase round in here, and then she increases right here and right here. And by that time, she's out to the shoulder. Do you see that? She's out to the tip of the shoulder. And between here and here, there are no more increases. So she's using the exact same concept. She's just distributing. So she's kind of using the circular with the wedge. Let me show you that. You see, this is so fun to me. I think this is like so exciting to play with this sort of stuff. I know for you, it's probably very mind-boggling. What she's done is she has an increase round here, an increase round here, and then she's distributed increases kind of in a wedge design on a very narrow little design, and then she has the final increase round. Might be reversed, but so you can do that. You can say, let's just take a little element of the yoke. Let's take an element of the yoke. You could have increases, an increase around here, and then you could treat the section between here and here as a wedge. So you would have increases on the edges instead of in a round. But by the time you got to the bottom of where that round would have had all of the increases, you've already created them all. You did it in a small stepwise approach. So when you get here, you don't need to make increases here. The fabric is already at the correct stitch count because you added them as you went along. Okay, let's see more questions. Not everybody's going to get this, but some people will, and that's okay. Let me go back to the paper. This is from Cat5TX again. She says, is there a good way to pick up stitches without getting a ridge on the wrong side? She's talking about the underarm, picking up the stitches, I'm assuming, or around the neck. It depends on the cast on that you use. So I would have to know what kind of cast on you used. I used the backward thumb loop or the knitted on cast on under the arms, and I do not get a ridge, and I pick up in the stitches. I have a video that shows how to do that, by the way. Okay, this is Susan Maloney. I'm a bit confused by part 3 of the Erin Bud Yoke video when we are doing the size 40 sweater 8 gauge, but following the cast on for 128. Are we following the directions for the 128 stitch or the 112 stitch all the way down? If you have 8 stitches to the inch, and it's not listed here, it just goes down to 7, and you figure out how many stitches you're going to have, it may not end up being in your size. You need to follow whatever the directions are. So she had got 128. I don't see 128 on here. Oh, here it is. Here's 128 right here. Yes, that's the one we did. You're going to follow all of those directions except for any length calculations. And the only time there are length calculations are when she tells you how many inches to knit before the next increase round. So you're just following a set of numbers. Don't think of it as a size. These aren't sizes here. Don't think of them as sizes. They're just a number. Okay, you're going to follow this. It's a XY axis, okay? Your X and Y falls on this box. So every chart, you're going to fall in that box, except for the length. For the length, look in the box for your size. Does that make sense? I hope that answered it. I know that can be confusing. But once you figure it out, it's like the light comes on, you go, oh, that's easy. This is from Susan Marie again. Question about the conversions described in Ann Budd Yoke Book Part 3. In the past, you've mentioned to not round off our stitches per inch gauge. How close should our gauge be in order to use the round gauge numbers listed in the book? And she gives examples of 6.25 stitches versus 6.1. If it's 6.1, I would round it to 6. If it's 6.25 to 6.75, I would use your actual numbers. Anything outside that, I would just round to the nearest whole number, either up or down. Okay? That's an excellent question. This is Z Purls. When determining my short row placement, I'm assuming front and back refer to the half of my cast on number respectively. Is this correct? Yes. So in a yoke, half the stitches are on the front, half are on the back. Very good question. This is Jane Socks. Would you go over where and how to measure the back neck, please? Yes, I'll do that. This is tricky. And, you know, because it's such a small area, if you're off by a little bit, it affects everything. So I put something around my neck, the neck. Not out here. That's not my neck. My neck, the smallest part of my neck, down where it connects with my shoulders. Then I pull these down. I want them to actually be parallel, not like this, not like this. They have to be exactly parallel. Exactly parallel. And then I measure between them. And I'm going to get 4 inches. My back neck is 4 inches. Now, if I wanted to figure out the circumference of my neck, I multiply that by 3.14, and that gives me circumference. So let's see. (3.14 times 4). 3.14 times 4. 12.56. Let's do it again. Let's see what we get. They have to be parallel. It might be. I'm probably not getting them parallel because of the distortion between here and the. But look in a mirror. Go in a mirror or have a friend measure you. Yeah, that's 4.5 because I'm 4.5. So it's 4.5. And just see, let me see the difference. 12.56 for 4. 4.5 is 14. And that's what I usually go by is 14. So I made a 2-inch difference. 2-inch difference by a 1/2 inch difference right here in the back of my neck. Okay, let's see. That's almost done with the written questions. And then we'll see some more that you've got in here live, okay? Question, this is from Nina K. This may have been covered already, but I also have questions about adjusting the neck size. The smallest one could have worked. The smallest one could have would be a crew neck. Oddly enough, a crew neck can stretch to go over your head, even if it is smallish. But I don't want that style. I want something a little lower in the front and I suppose the sides. So will we be able to calculate this well from the instructions? If we are knitting upward from the provisional cast on at the end, what will be the best way to design the style of neckline we want? If you want a more open neckline, measure around your neck in the more open position. Or like if you like this shirt, let's say you like this shirt. Lay it down and measure the circumference of the neck. If you have another piece of garment you like, lay it down, measure the circumference. If you don't, put a string or something around your neck the way you want the neck to be and measure it. And that's your starting point. Okay, this is from Z Purls. Question, do you have any videos for using hand-dyed yarns in the round? Yes, I do. There's just go on there from the previous knit along, and actually I think I already put it in the video list for this knit along. So there's one on using hand-dyed yarns in the round. You switch every round, and it's kind of like helix knitting. This is Hat Lover. Question, would you please discuss your opinion of superwash wool for sweaters versus 100% wool, pros and cons, and any concerns for steeking with either fiber? I use both all the time. I like, this is superwash. My Aran I did was non-superwash. I use either one interchangeably because I treat all my sweaters as if they were non-superwash. I never throw my knitting in the washing machine, and I never agitate it when I'm hand washing it. I treat everything as if it were non-superwash. I've put a lot of hours into knitting my projects. I do not want to take any chance whatsoever of them getting messed up. So I do everything by hand, then lay them out, reblock them to the size that I want them to be every single time I wash them. Now, that being said, I only wash my sweaters like once a year. As soon as the weather warms up and it's warmer outside and things dry, I'll get out the ones that I wore this year because I don't wear all of them every year, and I'll get them cleaned and laid out so that they dry quickly and don't mildew. Okay, let's go back over here. Let's see. Lori Jane says, I love the math. It's one of my favorite parts of knitting. I know, I'm a freak. I do too. I actually like that. I'd say I'm a knitting nerd. Okay. Katharina Continental combined. If loving math makes a freak, I'm a freak too. There's probably a bunch of us on here. You know, I think that I tell my students in my boot camp classes, because when we get to the part about measuring gauge, everybody's eyes just glaze over. It's amazing. If you like knitting, your brain likes math. Now, maybe you don't think you like math, maybe somewhere along the line, somebody told you you weren't good at math, or when you were in elementary school and they were trying to teach you, they didn't use a method that you could understand. That's their problem, not your problem. We don't all learn the same way, you know, and if you didn't ever get an opportunity to have a teacher who could explain it to you in a method that your brain could understand it, that was their fault, not your fault. And it doesn't mean that you don't like math. It means so far you haven't understood it. Knitting is so math related, even if you're not using math. If you don't think you're using math, when you're knitting, you're using math constantly. And if you like knitting, if you're addicted to knitting, most likely your brain likes math. You just need to have it explained to you in a way that makes sense. And once it does, you go, oh, it's no big deal. Okay. Okay, Kate Wilson, she says, this is Cat 5TX. In my question about the ridge on the back when picking up stitches, this is a generic question. Assume I'm picking up stitches along the edge of a scarf. I have some videos on picking up stitches. It might be how you're picking up stitches, because I don't get ridges when I'm picking up stitches. So maybe send me a picture. I would love it if you would send me a picture of what you're talking about, and then I'd be more likely to be able to help you. Okay? Question from Urgent. So if my shoulders are 10 inches from nape to shoulder, and my row gauge is let's say 5 rows per inch, then I should have increased 200 stitches by the time I get to the shoulder. 5 times 10 times 4. Possibly, except for you have to make allowance for where your neck's going to be. Okay? So you have to, when we did this part here, like on the pie shawl, you remove this part. There's no stitches here. So you're actually starting out after a few rings of the pie shawl. Yes. Yes, that's very good. 5 rows to the inch, though, is a big yarn, like bulky. If you're using worsted weight yarn, you're probably going to get 7 rows to the inch, okay? Okay. Urgent, any deducing and deducting neck hole. Very good. We're on the same page. Chaina Lazaroff, question. I'm way behind swatching now. What's your favorite provisional cast on method? I'm going to show one, okay? I like the crochet provisional cast on method, but I also like, let me show you one that's super easy. And I use this a lot. Super, super, you won't believe how easy this is. And it puts your stitches on a knitting needle, which I really like. So you don't have to go back and pick them up. They're already on the needle. But that means you need to leave your needle in. But if you have interchangeable needles, you can use those. Okay, so this is my provisional strand here. This is the provisional yarn. I have 2 needles, this needle, and I tied a slip knot and put my provisional yarn on it. Okay? This needle is going to hold the stitches. Actually, this is not the provisional yarn. This is your working yarn, your sweater yarn. Erase that part that I said that. This is your working yarn. This is your provisional yarn. It's a knitting needle instead of the provisional yarn. You hold the knitting needle so you just have the cable. You're just working with the cable, not the end. So that I have these kind of in the slingshot position. Do you see that? Where I've got my yarn, my working yarn over my finger like I'm going to knit. And this is what could be provisional yarn, or I'm using a knitting needle, okay? And I pick up a stitch from on top, then I bring my needle down and under the cable, and I pick up another stitch. Now I have 2 stitches. I yarn over, go under the needle, and pick up a stitch. Yarn over, go under the needle, pick up a stitch. Super easy, super fast. And if you have interchangeable needles, you can just leave all these stitches on the cable with a stopper on either end. So here's my stitches on the cable. My work would continue going this way. I could turn and start knitting. Now, when I come to these stitches, the first one's going to be, these will all be correct stitch mount, but when I go back and work with the ones off the needle, you'll have to reverse every other one. So I'm working off of the needle. I'm using my working yarn for my sweater. If I was knitting in the round, I would have joined in the round. I'm just doing a little sample here. So now I've started my sweater, and these stitches are all on hold on the cable. I do that all the time. I love this method. There's lots of other methods. So there's like a million types of provisional cast on, and whichever one you use is perfectly fine. Okay, let's see. And Chana, she said, I'm way behind swatching. You're not behind swatching. We're all swatching still. Nobody's starting their yoke yet. If they have, more power to them. But I think everybody's still swatching. So that's okay. It's going to take a while. That's why there's 2 weeks for this section, okay? Leslie Dunn says her cat really enjoys watching these live streams. Claudio Bueno, question, when swatching, should I increase the tube to get the feeling? What do you mean by that? Should I increase the tube to get the feeling? Oh, the size, swatching in the round. You can put on as many stitches as you want. I said 6 inches worth, but you can put 8 or whatever. Yeah, so you can get the feel of the fabric. Yes, that's a good question. Depends on how much knitting you want to do, okay? Leslie Dunn, knitting is applied mathematics, and a lot of people understand subjects better when applied. Exactly. If you see a reason why you want to use it, it suddenly makes sense. And Urgent says, yes, Leslie, and it's such pretty math. Yes, you get knitting as a result. Joyce Nugent, question, I am making a cardigan with a lace yoke. Is a provisional cast on still required? Yeah, I would still do a provisional cast on. If you're doing this yoke, if you're doing this knit along, yes, I would do the provisional cast on because you're going to want to come back and put the edging on. And by waiting till the end, you can make adjustments to the size of the neck. For example, most likely your neck will be bigger than what you thought it was going to be. But by adding the edging, you can control the size of the neck. You can bring it in to the size that you want it to be. It's much better to do that than to try to rip out the beginning of your sweater. Okay, it's much easier. Bonnie Davis, by increasing the neck opening size, that would also give less distance between the cast on and the top of the shoulder to place the increased rounds. Yes, it would. So you're using like from the center back neck out to the shoulder. And then if you measured the back neck width, and I get 4.5, you would subtract 2.25 inches from that number. And then that gives you the distance from here to here. Okay, Emily says, please scroll up because I missed a whole bunch of questions. Okay, thank you, Emily. Let me look up here. It'll take me a second. I'm sorry. Okay, I got those. So Carol Corcoran said, if using multiple colors in colorwork yoke, do you have to swatch the whole pattern or just part of it? Part of it is enough. You can just do a swatch, yes. Adriana, can you go over fitting different horizontal designs into the yoke? I did that, right? Did I answer that? Okay. And I got that one. Still not increasing in lacy. I did that. Do you think that would work well with using the knit steek? It might. This is Carol Corcoran's question. I'm using Lopi yarn worsted, was thinking of doing a knitted steek, then purl 7 rows, knit 1, purl 1. When finished, when you turn, pick up knit stitches formed from the purls. I'm not getting that. I'm sorry. I'm just not understanding that. Okay, Elaine. Okay, here we go. Question. How can we put a cable design into that yoke? Find one like a hat, small to large. Yes, exactly. Exactly. You start with a small and you increase it, and you can actually draw them out. It's really kind of fun. Cables are a fun thing to play with. So let's say you start out with a 2/2 cable, okay? So you've got 4 stitches, right? And you're going to work these up, and then you're going to cross them. So you made a cable crossing. Can you see this? And then you're going to work it up. And now let's say we want to, these are knit stitches, by the way, not purls. Let's say we want to make an increase. Let's say we want to make a 3/2 crossing. We would make an increase right before the cable crossing. So we could do this and do a make one here. Make one. And then we would do a 3/2 cable crossing. So we'd have 3 here and 2 here. Then you could, if in short order, go up to a 4/4, and then you could branch off and do a 2/2 over here, 2/2 here, have some purl stitches in here, go up here, 2/2, 2/2, and increase again. And you can really you can bring these back over here and cross them here, a big crossing here. You could start very skinny and get wide. It's very easy to do. It really is very easy to do. Or find one that's already done. For example, the hats. A lot of hats have the cables decrease very quickly from the edge of the crown up to here. And that would fit. This is about 4 inches right here, and that would fit very nicely into this section down here. Great question. I'm glad I caught that one. Okay. Let's see. Question. If we stop the design at the underarm, what is the significance of the bust point depth measurement? The bust point depth measurement is going to be for if we want to do bust shaping, and we'll address that at the finish of the yoke. So that's in the next section. By the way, in the knit along in the pages, let me pull it up here. I think I have it right here. Let me tell you what page it's on. When I refer to the knit along, I'm referring to the document. And when I refer to the book, I'm referring to Ann Budd's book, although my document probably does look like a book. On page, did you notice I have a table of contents this time? Page 2, that's pretty good. On page 4, it gives you the timeline of how it's going to come out. On March 22nd, optional bust and waist shaping, and continue to mid-waist of garment. This week is March 8th is the yoke. Learn the difference between raglan and yoke designs, the similarities and differences. Learn how yoke and pie shawl have the same characteristics. Learn how to adjust the size of the back neck opening, blah, blah, and all that stuff that we did. This is the meat of the whole thing, is these 2 weeks, is the yoke. The rest of it is just basic sweater construction. The yoke is what is the big design element in this. Okay, let me see. Janice Best Nesbitt put question, but there's no question. Emily Beaton, question, can you combine the wedge with the pattern changes in the yoke? Yes, you can. So you could have, just like this is an excellent example of that. This is the Zweig. Okay, so she's got these, that's what these little elements are. They're little repeat elements in this part of and then she has this big lace that she uses the wedge shaping for the lace. And then she has another little repeat design here. So she's combined the circular designs with the wedge design. And you can do that. It's perfectly okay. It's very fun. You can get as minimal creative or as maximal creative as you want with this. Okay, can you combine? Hi, Suzanne, question, what provisional? Okay, I did that. What if the beginning, Janice Best Nesbitt, question, What is the beginning process? I read about provisional cast on. What is that and how to do it? I showed you one just a minute ago. What a provisional cast on is a way to maintain live stitches that you'll come back to later and continue working on in the other direction. So on my little sample here, I have my live stitches down here on the cable. And I'm going to knit my project this way. My sweater will be knit this way. And then later on, I'll come back to these live stitches. I'll pull this needle. Those will be done. I'll pull my needle up into action. And now I have live stitches on my needle that I can work the neck from. Isn't that cool? Okay. Emily Beaton question, can the raglan and yoke patterns in the book be modified to work with a baby sweater size? She goes down to size, the smallest size that she gives is for a child with a 26-inch chest circumference. That's for the book. You can make it smaller if you want just by using the method that I show in the knit-along directions. The knit-along directions you could do completely without the book. The knit-along directions are just a tutorial on how to knit a yoke cardigan. But for people who the knitting theory part is too overwhelming for them, the book is a good fallback on, okay? Because you could just follow the book by Ann Budd. Okay. Question, yes, makes sense, but this means that the yoke's design needs to be very shallow. Sunny, what did she say about that? Sunny. Was that if you make the neck lower? Question, how do we avoid the... No, it doesn't make the yoke very shallow. I'm sorry, you didn't understand that. Let me say it again. So the yoke is going to come all the way out to here, okay? Remember, it's going to come all the way across here and up to here. The last increase round is right here. But the yoke continues to here. And then it'll be divided off for the arms. So the yoke goes all the way to the division for the arms. You can put design elements in this section right here. In fact, a lot of people do. This has design elements in that section. Do you see where the arms are divided off? Here's where the underarm is grafted. Right here. Okay, that's where the underarm graft starts. So she has a few rows past the last part of her yoke for the design. And that's a good method to follow because you don't actually want the design going into your armpit. That doesn't look very good. So you want to stop it a little bit before where your arm is going to divide off. Okay. Okay, Jane Hart came back. She says, the size I'm intending is 44 increase with ease with a 5.6 stitch gauge. After figuring out cast on numbers in her book, my intended size is 44 with a 5 stitch inch gauge. That doesn't sound correct. You won't be staying in the same size range. So if you're getting 5-point stitch, let me figure it out for you, okay? So if your intended size is 44 inches, and the book is and you're getting 5.6 times 5.6, that gives you 246 stitches. Okay, so let's look in the book. That's for your chest circumference. So let's look in the book. Well, let me just go to your cast on. Let me figure out the cast on. So 44 divided by 6 equals 44 divided by 107. 44 divided by 107 equals 44. Oh, no wonder my brain's dead. Okay, so we're going to say 107 divided by 6 equals 17.83 inches for your neck. Okay, circumference. And then we're going to multiply that times 5.6, which gives us 99.86. So you could be size 42 with a 6 stitch gauge, if you follow in that column, or you could be size 36 with a 7 stitch per inch, or size 50 with a 5 stitch per inch. Any of those will work, and you'll just follow those columns for those sizes. You're in 44. That's what your size is that you want to end up with, and you will end up with 44. But you're going to need to follow the design elements for, let's say, 42 at 6 stitches to the inch. That will give you 101 cast on stitches. And what I calculated was 99.86, so that's really very, very close. So you would, for this box, this is for 6 stitches to the inch and 42, you would follow that throughout the book, except for links. Links from going down, okay? Anything going circumference or stitches or increases, you're going to follow size 42, 6 stitches to the inch, okay? Okay, let's see the next question. Carol Corcoran says, this does not give me enough room for my full question. I'll ask in the group. Okay. Oh my goodness, it's been an hour and 21 minutes. Oh my gosh. Okay. Question. Swatching for color work, do you have to do the full pattern, or we just talked about that? Okay. I think I've gotten some of these, the 10 inches. I've done that. We might be catching up. Okay. Elaine Homestead question, if we stop the design at the underarm, what is the significance of the, okay, I answered that. Okay. Okay, hold on. If we stop the design at the end, okay, Suzanne is casting using cable. Margit, I'm sorry that you got the information that the chat started 1 hour late. You know, we have this time change in the United States, and I tried to post it out where most people would get it, but it may not have gotten to you. I'm sorry. Okay, Frank HB said to make a video of the provisional cast on. Let me add that to my list. I'll do that. Okay, that's an easy one to do. This is from Anne. Question, sorry, it's not on the yoke. When you do a bust shaping, when times comes to block, there is a difference. Let's talk about that in the bust shaping part, okay? Because we're kind of running over. I hate to cut you off like that. I'm very, very sorry. That is rude. I'm sorry to do that. But we're kind of running out of time here. Let's see. This is from Rebecca Sinkle. Question, I'd like to use a yoke pattern from the Japanese Stitch Bible, so I need to swatch. Yep. You got to swatch everything. If you want it to fit, you have to swatch. If you like to gamble, then don't swatch. Chances are it won't fit, okay? Oh, shoot, it jumped up. Okay. Question, I once knit a sweater that combined a wedge yoke and then with raglan increases. How do you do the math for both? I'm not going to tell you about that right now. That's a whole nother thing. Okay, we're just talking about yoke. Mary Shue, question, ease is not added to the armhole depth measurement when using to figure out depth of yoke. Correct. Length measurements never have ease. Circumference measurements have ease except the neck. Don't add ease to the neck, but for your arms and your bust if you want to add ease, okay? Okay, now 7-3, I'm Margaret. Question, how did you do the math? Can you do another example? Can you go back and watch it again? And it is in the video that I did on that too, okay? So Aline Mazuka, question, should we still shoot for 4-inch positive ease? You can, or you can use 10%. Either one of those will work. Okay, so Urgent says I already have a video of that provisional cast on. Okay, good. Okay. I'm going to call it quits for today. My brain is dead. I think we're doing good. And, oh, Rona tells me there's new Diac needles available. I'll have to take a look. Anyway, I hope this was helpful and that you can move ahead a little bit. Of course, we're going to be on here again this Wednesday at noon. So be sure to post your questions in my Ravelry group. And I'll see you on Wednesday. I'm going to start working on my sweater. I have it all planned out and I'm going to do it. I have a couple more videos. I have one video that I made today. It's already made and it's up on Ravelry. I just have to post it. It's all up there. I just need to add my stuff, but it's doing intarsia in the round. This is makes little diamonds, but it's intarsia in the round. So I made that today, and that'll be coming out this afternoon. I have a zipper one coming out soon, and then I'll work on some of these others. So take care, happy knitting, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.